The company that I worked for at the time spent $37 million a year on sales and $2.5 million a year on marketing. And with a 5K experiment, we landed 3 customers. Now you're taking it from $100,000 to get a customer to $1,500. And they shut the program down.
He founded Refine Labs, which became the leading demand generation agency for high-growth B2B companies. And he got famous for saying the thing that nobody wanted to hear, that the dashboards everyone was worshiping were actually lying to them.
I never feel stressed. I never feel in a rush. I never feel guilty. I never feel any of those emotions anymore. And I used to all the time.
Explain Encoded the way you'd explain it to your own engineer brain.
A concept called your frequency. I view it as equivalent to having an IQ or to measuring your VO2 max. We feel symptoms, second guessing ourselves, imposter syndrome, feeling anxious sometimes, not going for the thing that we know we want it, but we don't go for it. If you do not know who you are, then how can you trust yourself to be you?
On this show, we talk about trust constantly. Trust with buyers, trust with the market. But listening to you, I don't think that trust starts like out there. I think it starts with self-trust. The ceiling is a human being who trusts themselves. AI just raised the floor for everybody at once. So what happens to the people and the marketers who only ever trained for the old floor? What does the future look like for them?
What did the future look like for the factory worker that never learned how to use a computer?
Welcome to the Trust Network podcast. My guest today is one of the most influential voices in the history of B2B marketing. And that's not even the most interesting thing about him. Chris Walker is an engineer by training. He studied electrical and biomedical engineering at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, where he graduated with high distinction. And his early work was on the nervous system, measuring signals in the human body that the conscious mind cannot control. He took that engineer's brain into business. He spent years in medical devices, and then in 2019, he founded Refine Labs, which became the leading demand generation agency for high-growth B2B companies. He worked with hundreds of them, and he got famous for saying the thing that nobody wanted to hear, that the dashboards everyone was worshiping were actually lying to them, and that the most valuable work in marketing was being created in places you could not measure, and I think you coined dark social. Then he did the thing that almost nobody does. The top of that mountain, he walked down it. He handed Refine Labs to a new CEO, Megan Bowen, and in 2025, he sold his remaining stake and stepped away entirely. And he poured everything into a new company called Encoded and a book called The Frequency Era. Now, on the surface, a lot of people look at that and see a hard left turn. I kind of did initially. The numbers guy, he went and he got spiritual. But the more I have studied his work, the more convinced I am that there was never a turn at all. I think the engineer measuring the nervous system in college, the marketer who said the real value lives where the dashboard can't see it, and the founder building Encoded today are all the same person, making the same argument. And I don't think Refine Labs was the destination. I think it was a step on the way to it. So that is what I want to get into. Chris Walker, welcome to the show.
Let's go, bro. Awesome intro. I think that you really nailed it, and I think this is going to be a perfect conversation to work through it together and to discuss it. So thank you.
Of course. Let's jump into it. So Chris, I just told the audience that I think your whole career has been one argument, not 2 chapters. But before I say what I think it is, I want to hear it from you. So when you look back at the engineer, the Refine Labs years, and Encoded, does it feel like a pivot, or does it feel like you were always kind of walking towards this, destination?
So I like to sometimes quote one of my favorite book that I haven't written, which is Mastery by Robert Greene. And if you look back in history with tons of people that have made significant contributions, Einstein, some musicians, a variety of others, that on their way to mastering a craft, it doesn't make sense on paper. And that it seems like you're going way over here and then a left turn way over here. And then what happens is that you bring all of it together into this brand new mastery creation. And I really do see that my career path while I was going through it, and it didn't make a lot of sense on paper. And then it all clicks for me, and it's like, whoa, I'm bringing all of these pieces together into one creation that I think is going to positively impact humanity in so many different ways. And I continue to bring all of these different elements, whether it's the all the clinical trial work that I did for like 5 years, and the engineering background, the systems thinking, the category design, even in the way that I approached marketing, it was really about seeing through and seeing inside the systems that other people couldn't see. And I feel like Encoded is generally doing the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, and I feel like we could almost drill down on that because I feel like for the people listening, if they're in the middle of these pivots, number one, you're aware and kind of thinking like, all right, where am I headed? Am I making pivots? So there's kind of the internal component. And then the outside world is seeing you make these pivots too. It seems like for you, you were aware that you may not have known the final destination and you were making pivots in the attempt to get to mastery. Is that pretty accurate as opposed to just being like the outside world saw it, but you had a perfect picture the whole time?
Um, so in I'm not sure I understand the question fully, but in the most recent evolution that I went through, I a lot of people saw it as like, whoa, this is like a hard what is going on with this guy? It's like a whole hard left turn. And it's like there are so many athletes, musicians, business people that like your favorite musician starts playing totally different music, right? And you're like used to the stuff they used to play. Oh, that person. Some people are like, oh, that person sold out. They're a fraud now. I like their old stuff better. And other people are like, this is really creative. This is awesome. Like I support this person. And and so I've seen that evolution happen before, and I can imagine that's what people think about what I did, right? But to the musician, it's I have to do this, like, I have to do it, right? And so if you're caught up in wondering like, "Oh, like, what are all these people gonna think about me?" Right? Or, "I can't do that. I have all this," some people would call it like assets or debt. I have all these the accumulated knowledge and the audience that I have. I've built all this up. I can't leave this. I need this, right?
Mm.
For me, it was just like, I have to do this. So there was no thinking about what are people going to think about this. Should I go back and like maybe this is too much, maybe it's not safe. Like none of those questions ever crossed my mind. It was like, no, this is it. Um, so that's how I reflect on it.
That answers my question perfectly. Yeah, and I think it takes time for people to get to that point where they're kinda just pushing what the outside world may be thinking. You got family chirping in, you got peers chirping in, but you had already made progress with, doing Encoded yourself and building it. You were doing a lot of the self-work in that process from what I pick up on from your previous podcast where you had built that kind of self-trust, and your identity kind of was grounded enough for you to be able to make these pivots without really caring what the outside world thought along the way. Is that fair to say?
When when you develop the level of self trust, it's not even a question that goes through your mind. You're like, I if a way to say it is like if you are a explorer, imagine like the 1600s, and you're going out to go and find a new land, right? And you're the first boat. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna turn back and look at the boats behind you and be like, hey, well, should I turn left or right here? And it's like you can't do that. And so at some point, some of us reach a level where it's like the only person that knows what's right for me is me. I trust myself to be able to navigate this. I am going to I feel committed and I feel conviction around this idea. And there's no one I can ask for which direction to turn. And so you develop this level of nobody knows what's right for me but me. And I think that is like one of the most liberating places to be as a human.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could attest to that. And I think I'll get into that in a bit when we kind of turn it on me a little bit. But I want to kind of go back all the way to like college, right, for a second. Your early engineering work, right, was on the nervous system. We're measuring things in the body that perhaps a conscious mind can't override. That was around 2011, not too far around the time I graduated, and more than a decade before Encoded is when that happened. So did you know that then you were circling something, or is that only more obvious now as you kinda look back?
There was yeah, no idea really. And so one of the major things that we were working on in college was a confidential project at the time for a defense contractor, um, was to use a camera and infrared light. So, for those of you that don't know, there are lots of spectrums of light that the eye can't see. So, infrared light is in a spectrum where there is light there, but our eyes can't see it. Sort of like Wi-Fi, right? The Wi-Fi is there, but you can't see it with your eyes, right? So the infrared light hits the back of your pupil and it lights up the floods the whole pupil. And then with a camera, you can measure the changes in the size of a pupil. And based on how much size is changing and how fast it's changing, you can tell if somebody's lying. You can tell if somebody's intoxicated. You can tell a lot of things with a camera and an invisible light. Um, and that is a very easy example of something that happens automatically in our body that we have no control over. And there are thousands, there could be millions of processes that happen in our body that happen automatically that we do not have conscious control over. And I think that now looking back, it makes a ton of sense. It's also, I think, super fascinating. Um, and to that a majority of the way this has been studied up to this point is related to, clinical problems, for lack of a better way to say it. Um, and when you switch it and you switch it from like, I need to fix this person to this person has so much potential that hasn't been, so you switch it from fixing to performance enhancement. um, it creates a whole different lens of what you're doing while you're looking at it and why. So I think it's a fascinating new field that's yet to be studied. I see like all the famous people like Huberman and Brian Johnson and whoever, the people that are doing great work at Whoop and everything. And generally, basically everyone overlooks everything that happens in your nervous system. It's from a and so I think that's a crazy field of study, a wide open green field for anyone can come in and help and contribute in this way. And I just find it a fascinating thing to continue to explore.
Yeah, I'm gonna bookmark that too because, the concept behind training our nervous systems, which may sound really esoteric to people, probably because the Whoop can't even pick up on all of the things that are potentially measurable by through the nervous system today, in the future that may come back. And I wanna get to that, but what I wanna talk on is because you've had this evolution, obviously, in your career and where you are today. I wanna kinda talk about how you started in biomedical engineering and medical devices, right? Then you moved into marketing, and you didn't just join it, right? You didn't just join as someone that showed up, you ran a small agency, you kinda sat in the back, just try to collect a check, but you tried to blow up how it was done. What I wanna know is where did that conviction come from? Even as someone who didn't study marketing back in college and have a ton of marketing experience per se, how did you become so convicted, and what made you so sure that a lot of people were doing it wrong and you were onto something right?
So a lot of people don't know this, but I worked in B2B marketing, product management, pricing, uh, downstream like comms and demand gen for 5 or 7 years before I started Refine Labs. It just wasn't in VC backed tech companies. It was in VC backed medical device companies and publicly traded holdings companies and things like that. And when I had the big insight was that the company that I worked for at the time spent $37 million a year on sales and $2.5 million a year on marketing, and most of the marketing expenses were spent on headcount and events. And I introduced a what I would consider, and this is 2015, um, a progressive like demand generation approach into this company. And they gave me a $5,000 budget to test,
Mm.
right? And our current customer acquisition cost is like 100 grand, right? So at 5K, you can't even really figure anything out because you'd need to spend 20 times that in order to meet the CAC of one customer, right? Um, and with a 5K experiment, we landed 3 customers. And we so now you're taking it from $100,000 to get a customer to $1,500. Um, and so that was profound. Back in the day, like before 2018 Cambridge Analytica, you could literally go into Facebook ads and type, I want to target the respiratory director at this hospital. It was perfect B2B targeting. All the ER physicians, I uploaded a list of 500 hospitals. You targeted everyone and every single one of our accounts. I was running a ABM strategy with no tech, getting clicks for less than 2 cents.
Mm.
So it was absolutely insane. And then I presented the data to the CEO and the leaders of the company, and and it was like, okay, our pipeline velocity, our customer acquisition costs, our growth rate, like this is a really good idea. And they shut the program down. So they shut the program down. They decided to double their sales headcount next year. And so that was the moment that I realized, oh, like people just don't look at this the way that there was a 50 million dollar company at that point that had raised $300 million. It's like people just don't look at it the same way that I do. So I knew how much it worked, and I realized how much people were missing the point. And that was where the conviction really developed. And then I left that company. I brought the strategy to a new company, and the same thing happened 9 months later. And so once I saw it twice, then I was like, I can see the pattern here that everyone's following a certain playbook. I've tried all the things in that playbook. I realized that mine works 100 times better, what I've developed. And then so that was the conviction it was not just some random idea of like, oh, I think I'm cool. It was like, oh, I can see this in real life about how people just aren't understanding this the right way. And that how much things have changed from like building a tech company in 2005 to building a tech company in 2019. And then COVID happened. Right. And when COVID happened, that was really like my message was being received pretty well up until that point. But when COVID happened, that's when everything, like, it became really obvious because companies couldn't spend 50% of their variable marketing budget on events anymore. So they had to put it somewhere. And basically everyone had underestimated digital up until that point. And so at that point, it's like a change happened that was outside, and I was just sitting there waiting with like the right strategy that I developed to catch that wave.
I feel like this is therapy for both me and a lot of the marketers, a lot of CMOs that will tune in and I talk to because it still exists today, right? And maybe your exit out of Refine at that point is like it wasn't that long ago, but not a whole lot has also changed. And we see that a lot, right? We're seeing, the sales driven CEO kind of has a blind eye to the marketing, wants to double revenue, so he'll double sales count. It doesn't work. Then they bring in a firm to help with marketing. Marketing outperforms. And he goes, that works really well. I'm going to go hire twice as many salespeople again. It's almost like they're not hearing the own empirical data, right? And since you had two kind of at bats to do that and see it work, I can see where that kind of experience lends itself to then self trust, and then conviction, right? And then you built a major platform on that. So hopefully I'm capturing that right. But it sounds like you put yourself out there, took a very calculated, a bet or made a very calculated bet. It worked on 2 accounts. And then that kind of built some of that self trust for you as a launch to this.
And just because of my level of conviction didn't me and just like how to me how obvious it was and how many people were agreeing with me and things like that, still, I don't know what the exact figure is, but there were quite a few companies that failed in our system at Refine Labs. right? And companies that were, from a metric standpoint, succeeding, doing way better than they were before they hired us, and still failed in our system. Whether they churned, they said this isn't working, they gave up, or whatever they did. Um, and so through that process, I began to realize that this isn't about first principles. This isn't about objectivity. Um, it's not about that when you work with companies that raise a lot of money. And when I started to realize that, it made it had me feeling less connected to the original vision of the company. Um, and then just as a note, it's like I had a lot of conviction in the ideas, but that's not how self trust is developed, right? So even when I have a lot of conviction in my ideas and had seen it work in those places, I'm still, in 2019 getting ready to post on LinkedIn and thinking, there's so many people out there that are more experienced than me. Who's going to care what I have to say? Right. I'm still getting nervous before I do a speech. I'm still scared to spend $10,000 on an event because I only have $30,000 in my bank account when I'm getting my company off the ground. Right. And so the misconception that I figured out on my own is that self trust is rarely built through action. Action is a part of it, but it rarely starts at action. And I think that was a huge breakthrough for me, and also through what we're doing at Encoded.
That's very helpful for me to know too, because I feel like a lot of the training that I'm doing right now, whether it's the certainties or beliefs, the self trust that I'm building, it hasn't, I wouldn't say shaped into visions, um, as blatantly obvious to me as moments of like absolute clarity. Right? Like, I just get super clear. Eric's not on the conversation with us. He's sitting back in the producer room as we talk here. Eric will attest, like, either Alano's on some kind of new supplement or peptide that just came out, but there's these moments of clarity that a team that has watched me make decisions very slow now make decisions with clarity and like what I would describe like calm leverage. It feels a lot less anxious and forced, and I think that clarity came through not just my experience, 'cause I've been doing this for a decade, Chris, but the amount of clarity that I'm having just in the last 4 months, it surmounts that collectively. And I mean,
Mhm.
there's some perfect coincidences of what I'm doing with Encoded, right? I don't have a promo code, not trying to sell Encoded, but as my own case study, and we'll get into it in a little bit, it's very eerie to see how timely the moments of clarity I'm having, running an agency for almost a decade now, are coming all around this period.
So, a good way to explain this is, imagine that for the past 10 years, you have been using a foam roller,
Mm,
going for a walk every once in a while, uh, using a sauna once in a while, and then you just figured out that you can train with weights. And it's like, oh, like, yeah, I don't get stronger by using a foam roller. And so it really is like that, for try to help people understand it. It's like, uh, it's really getting to the root of the highest leverage place that you can focus, right? As a leader, as a parent, as an artist, as a student, in any as a child, as a young adult, in any area of life. And it's the crazy thing to me, the thing that's been most surprising is how underappreciated it is, or how people, you even mentioned it before, how people think, oh, this is pseudoscience,
mm.
like this is woo, this is whatever, right? Um, so that's been pretty interesting, and maybe we'll get into the shift that you had around that, if that was even part of your journey.
Yeah, yeah, totally. We're gonna get into that. I think the last question I had that pertains to like the past season, right back at Refine, is when you sold, the shares of Refine Labs, which is always kind of like a North Star for agency owners. I don't think they say, hey, I want to operate like this until I die necessarily. Like there's always that exit in mind. This is a company that kind of made your name, or you could say you made the company's name And a lot of people would say that the company was your identity. And you now teach that an identity built on a title can be fragile, right? So I do have to ask, like, when you sign that away, did a part of you come apart at all, or did it challenge your identity at that point?
No. I'd gotten I was over it by the time that I decided to sell it. I think that, the one of the most challenging periods of my business career was the, year before I decided to sell it, because, um, I I was maybe attached to it, and I was very much attached to, the money, the title, the whatever, that even though I was ready to let it go, that I didn't, and that was actually the challenging part, but by the time I decided that I'm going to sell it, I made the decision in one day. I had the vision for Encoded, the next day I decided I'm selling the company, um, so do I don't, I don't regret anything about how it happened because it needed to happen the way that it happened in order for me to get here. So it's not like I'm going back and saying, "Oh, I wish I did something different." And I'd suggest that basically everyone consider adopting a mindset around that about around their life, but that's beside the point. That it just when the time was right, I was ready to move on.
You know, it's interesting too. Before we started recording, you kind of talked about you were either on travel outside of maybe the states when you kind of had this vision for Encoded. Was it when you were on like a vacation at some point, taking a sabbatical, where you had time to like think through that, or when did it happen?
I had the vision for Encoded on a random Tuesday in my kitchen in Austin, Texas.
Cracking a few eggs, making breakfast, about to go on a run, like nothing extra. Like you weren't so far out of your element. Is the point?
I was not out of my element. I had a sales call for my software company that I was running at the time because I wasn't operational in Refine Labs that was coming up, and I started to have the vision for Encoded, and 2:59 for a 3 o'clock meeting. I was like, "Hey, I'm not gonna be able to make it to this meeting." So I canceled an important sales call a minute before it started, and um, just yeah, it was one of the most powerful, couple of hours of my life. Extreme clarity around where I'm going, how it all fits together. Right, that was the first level of clarity of like, oh, how you sort of put the pieces together. It eventually made sense to me at that point.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then that was the how it happened.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's get into Encoded and what you're building now and get some more, detail, get a little more granular. So, for someone hearing the words frequency training for the first time and quietly bracing for what you've joked about as like the woo or something mystical, right? Explain Encoded the way you'd explain it to your own engineer brain.
Um, if you can imagine in 1940 that that you told people that you're going to measure your HRV and you're going to measure your VO2 max and you're going to get a blood test every quarter, and that you have this thing called an IQ and you have this thing called an EQ and you have this thing called an AQ and you have all these things, they would have looked at you and said, "Dude, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean? Like this invisible thing called my IQ that sits in my brain? Like what do you mean what that is?" Right? And now it's just obvious to us. And so what I'm presenting here is a concept called your frequency. I view it as equivalent to having an IQ or to measuring your VO2 max. Um, and what it is the power of your subconscious foundation, your autonomic nervous system that gets expressed through your nervous system. And when it gets expressed through your nervous system, it can be measured. It can be measured through a proxy measurements right now, but over time there'll be a direct measurement of HRV, EEG, cortisol, vagal tone. There's a variety of measurements that already exist. And when we have, let's just go with HRV because it's the best proxy that exists right now. It is already proven through science that higher HRV leads to better emotional regulation, higher mental clarity, better connection with other humans, better leadership, better athletic performance, better um, handling of stress and uncertainty. And so that connection has already been made. It's like, oh, if I have a higher HRV, then all of these things happen. It's already been proven by science. So then the question becomes, okay, so what is the most effective way to increase the power of our nervous system, right? If HRV is a proxy, and if we have a greater capacity in our nervous system, then we have all these benefits. Okay, so then how do we do that? And up until this point, people have focused on what I'll call like using foam rollers, right? Like meditation or going to therapy or reading more books or hiring a coach or doing a cold plunge or taking a bunch of supplements or things like that. Um, and the discovery that we've made just by connecting the dots is that all of those things can improve the existing performance of your nervous system, but it's not going to expand the power of it. That your power is actually limited through your automatic subconscious programs, your frequency. And that when you actually upgrade your programs, it creates the space for more power in your nervous system, which gives you access to all these functions, which is why you feel the way that you feel after doing it for, some people feel it after 3 to 7 days, right? And I'm sure that as you've gone through it, it actually gets stronger and stronger. Just like if you ran a mile every day for 6 months, that running the mile would feel a lot easier after you started doing it for a little while.
Mhm.
So the benefits that we get compound similar to a fitness training routine. And so I think that this shift about thinking about our nervous system similar to fitness is basically a entirely new and really powerful concept when it comes to human performance, longevity, um, creativity, um, tons of different areas, leadership. So tons of different areas that I just don't think have been well explored at this point.
I can state that my HRV is up to close to about 20% over the last 4 months. Um, I am aware that like HRV is somewhat genetically inherited to a degree, from what I understand, at least in the research, and you can improve it in several ways. And so, me doing it right now through a little bit of um, better sleep health, like, the best drug I feel like I could take is good sleep at the end of the day. Having a good community, good relationships, setting boundaries. Like those all seem like a little woo when I tell people I think that's increasing my HRV. And I'm like, well, look at the measurement here. I've done triathlons, marathons, I've done all of this stuff, and it didn't really move up too much. Now I'm focusing on other things, kind of in what I'm picking up through Encoded and some of my own research. And it is pretty validating when you check your Whoop in the morning. It's like, hey, HRV is up 15%, right? Or, VO2, which is a little different, more anaerobic focused.
Mm.
Those may play off of one another. But what I'm really curious about is how close are we to getting that one metric in Whoop? Like what is happening on the frontier of that? Because that would be so cool to be able to really see a single metric for the frequency.
Um, I, I don't think we're that close. I think that for a while we'll be using proxies, um, and will require quite a bit of clinicals and maybe some, new types of devices and understanding. So I don't think that we're that close to a direct measurement. Um, just like in, before they measured IQ, but you could tell if someone was smarter than somebody else. like, and
Mhm.
so I think that um that there's a what I talk about in my book is there's a huge opportunity for people that recognize what's happening and develop these capacities before it's mainstream accepted. Um, and so that's sort of the general thesis here, as I see it as a totally new frontier for both human performance and potential, but as well as economic success and contributions, and life satisfaction. So just a really interesting combination of things right now.
Yeah, when you look at like life cycle, like of a product, right, or a particular like industry, I feel like maybe we're in the early adopter phase. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where this is still like a form of science people can't put a number on entirely. If they're trying it, if they're using encoded, they are people who probably are early adopters to some extent. But I don't want to say that and misquote it. Where do you feel
Mhm.
like we are in the greater stage of this?
Um, early stage of early adopter.
Yeah. I'm on the frontier. I'm on the frontier, at least
Frontier.
about
That's a good
something.
way
I
to
wish I
put
would
it.
have done that with, crypto a little better, but maybe this will result to better outcomes at the end of the day.
And I mean, I get it,
Mm,
right? When I started to do this, right, I viewed it as, oh, this is just some basic journaling routine that I'm doing.
mhm,
It took me 3 years looking back to realize how much different my life every single day is. For I had to do it for that long of a time.
mm.
Kind of like how it's like if you see someone that's worked out for 10 years, you're like, "Whoa, like that person is different." Right? They worked out for 10 years, right? It's not so I get the how people think about, what is this actually gonna do for my life? People feel the benefits within 3 years. It's like more, well, many people feel the difference in 3 days, but to have the compounding effect where it's like I have a incredible relationship. I built and sold a business that operated on my own. I'm building a new business that's paving the way. My bank account has never been better. I'm in top 1% health. You measure my EEG, my HRV, my VO2 max. Like I just got a 61 and a half. My VO2 max, my EEG is absolutely insane. And so it's like, I never feel stressed. I never feel in a rush. I never feel guilty. I never feel any of those emotions anymore. And I used to all the time, right? And so some of it is like invisible to others, right? But like we can tell the difference, right? We can tell the difference in how we feel, how we think, how we show up. Other people, your team notices, your family probably notices, your children definitely notice because of the nervous system co-regulation effect. Children are the people that pick up on it the most.
Mm.
Um, And so it's because your nervous system is signaling to them it is safe. So they spend more time with you. They feel more calm. They cry less. Like there's true effects that people notice specifically with their children because it's happening in a nonverbal way that they don't understand, right? And we don't understand fully until it's explained. But it's a natural human phenomena, well studied.
Yeah, and I wanna get into that too, 'cause I wanna make it real for the people listening, and, I think the most honest way to do that is to kinda put myself on the table. So I've done the encoded frequency mapping, twice. Obviously, this is a journal, but the mapping I do through the website, right? Once in February and then once in May. And I brought the receipts. I have a few notes here that I kinda took. So February, I was at a tier 1.8. It was default programming. I'd actually just come out of my first real burnout. We do a lot of video marketing, so we do a lot of video shoots on the road, and, I was just traveling everywhere. I think I spent 170 nights of the year out, and I have kids, and that's brutal. They gotta come on a few trips, but that's not sustainable long term. Money was very much tied to my worth, Chris, and it just it doesn't come to me as like the thought. I think what I wrote is money doesn't come to me like it does to my peers. And maybe, as an econ major and having friends that work at massive hedge funds isn't a really good way to compare, but I felt like if I slow down in life, I'm going to fall behind. So just keep going harder, the grind set mindset. I need to prove myself to be enough. If I don't control everything, things go wrong. And the one that I think that really stung that the map pointed out is that I was like this introspective achiever who treats myself like a project. And when the business had started to face some challenges and cash got tight, it made me have like this scarcity voice that was really loud. Right. And now, so that's in February when I had done this after burnout. I think that was a time around I had got the whoop. When I got my labs, cortisol was a little high, HRV was a little suppressed. And I'm like, hopefully this tier's only on a level of, 1 to 2, because then I'll be high, but it goes up to a 7, correct?
6.
6.
And to be clear for the audience, right? Before you had the map, you were not aware of any of that, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
Exactly.
Not at all. And I mean, what was interesting is like I'm already comfortable writing, a lot of typing. So the first part of encoded when I, filled out the information to get the mapping done is it was just a lot of typing. I didn't use AI to do it. You guys say don't use AI because obviously it's not you saying it.
Mhm.
But I did a voice chat in it. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like in bed, spending a half an hour talking into this thing for this whole new concept in my mind. But what's interesting is now it's, end of June, this pod will come out early July. But but the line from my own February report that had kind of stopped me cold was money first, creation later. So I figured that, if I prioritize content now, I'm being irresponsible. I should go focus on fixing the money or the cash or customers. And like most founders, I think I fell into that trap of letting my content slip. And it became a far second to chasing client work, operational side of the business. And I became like the cobbler whose kid doesn't have any shoes. Right. And so I really had to sit with that one because I run a company that I tell my clients to trust the compounding power of content and let's show up as a person. And my own map said quietly that I don't even fully believe that myself. And I was running exactly the scarcity that I coach people out of. A little bit, I felt like an imposter there in that moment. So that was the first mapping that I had went through. I don't know if you had anything you want to add to that, but I had done another mapping since then too.
Just a note for the audience, and so that's a good before set that our data and most of our clients, right? Almost the people that use Encoded right now are athletes, entrepreneurs, founders, executives, what you would consider a high performer. And based on our data, more than 75% of the population starts in the spot that you said, right? And so if you expand that out to just every human, not like high performers and things like that, our estimate is somewhere between 85 and 90% of humans live in the beginning state of where you are. And I think an interesting thing to pull out is that it has nothing to do with how much money you make. It has nothing to do with how successful you are. It has very little to do with any of those elements, right? I was in tier 1.8 when I started, right? I don't We didn't have the score, but like basically everybody starts in tier 1 because it's the default. It's
Mm.
like this is how a human is programmed until they start taking control of what they choose to experience for themselves.
Yeah. And I think for the outside world, they might have been like, oh, Alano's got to be a tier 5 or a tier 6. Like, look, he's composed. He seems well put together. He's going to the gym. If he looks that way, maybe he also feels great. But it couldn't be any further from the truth.
Hmm.
It really couldn't. Now, I had done the second mapping, I think beginning middle of May, close to about 90 days after, right, for the program. And I was at a tier 2.7. So kind of like breaking the illusion, right? Nearly a full tier in 3 months. And honestly, I feel like if I did it today, it'd be closer to the threes, right? And we'll have to see probably in the next 60 days here. Feel like I'll have about a month of like some vacationing, boating, and downtime in me. I might just bounce up to a four. We'll see. But what had changed, and I think that's really important to highlight, like as this case study from, putting myself out there is my weekly rhythms had changed. I had set real boundaries. I had become aware of things and information that crosses my, eyes and ears every day, but I clung on to a few things. One of them being protecting my sleep, creating some boundaries. Like it just became so obvious. And I was like, okay, I work out super hard. I've cold plunged, I've sauned, all the other stuff that people convince you is what's going to help you be in a better state. And I was like, what if I prioritize sleep? Right? What if I go get some blood work done? Right? What if I like try to heal some relationships? Right. So my mind started to instinctively have different thoughts. And then health kind of became the anchor instead of the anxiety, right? Like I think at a certain point, my resting heart rate was up towards the end of Q4 last year, higher than it ever was. And I was like, what's going on here? Oh, that's burnout. I remember one time, Chris, I wanted to take a nap in the middle of the day because I was so tired, but I was so tired. It sounds really strange. I didn't feel like I was going to wake up. So I forced myself to stay awake and it was a surreal thing. And I had like struggled with some form of disassociation as I describe it to people. And that was Q4, but now turning the corner, right? Where my Whoop age had said I was 39 about 5 or 6 months ago. It says I'm 33 now, which is interesting. And I do think
It's
it's pretty
insane.
accurate. I don't think they're just trying to sell you on a new subscription. I think that they are objectively analyzing sleep quality, consistency, HRV, VO2, all the fun stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
when you look at the statistical averages, their statistical average is somebody that's older than their chronological age from a biological standpoint. And so they're definitely not trying to cheat you into a subscription because more than the median is older biologically than they are chronologically.
yeah, if they were trying to treat you to the subscription, they wouldn't tell you objectively, don't drink. Like my Whoop app will be like, hey, you had a drink a few months ago. Look at your sleep performance, right? And
Mhm.
going back to COVID, like you touched on from the business perspective, on the personal side of things, I didn't drink at all during COVID. It was like almost like a 3-year stint where I didn't drink any alcohol. And at that point, I was like, this is negatively impacting the business. This is affecting my relationships. I'm not being the best version of myself. But even as you look at some of the data today, a single drink doesn't seem to have any net positive benefits, right? Which may be a little triggering for some people. And when I'm on site with clients, if I choose to have an athletic brewing drink, a non alcoholic, the eyebrows raise and they go, "Oh, you're one of those guys. Something's wrong with you." Right. So I know you had mentioned not drinking either. And I'm just curious if that, for the people that are listening, maybe are thinking of trying not drinking. Um, was that hard initially, or was it just like a moment of clarity you had and hard to sustain even with the social pressure of it too?
My progression was mine, so I'll just share my story, and people can take with it what they wish.
Mm.
I started my business in 2019. At about 2 months into my business, when it was starting to do pretty well, I started saying no when people invited me to the bar on Friday and Saturday night, like I always used to go. And I was like, no, I'm not going to the bar. I'm going to work on my business and go to sleep and go to the gym on Sunday morning instead of being hungover until 1 in the afternoon.
Mm.
So I started saying no to that. But if I was out at a client dinner or a QBR with my company or things like that, I would still have a couple of old fashions or with my business partner or things like that. And there was one, and then I got the Whoop around right, a little bit before COVID. And for 2 years, I would go through that cycle where I wasn't drinking aggressively and I wasn't drinking a lot, but I would have a couple of drinks here and then, and it would tank my sleep. I'm very much more aware of my own performance. I realized that I wasn't thinking the same way, leading in the same way, working out in the same way. So had this level of awareness that, hey, this is negatively impacting my life, and it's clear in the data that it is. But when we're at the business dinner, I'm still going to do that. And then my company was like 100 people, right? And I'm out with the leadership team the day before everybody flies in. I'm making a speech to everyone at 9 in the morning. And I have two old fashions like I always do. And then I wake up the next morning, I can just making the speech. I'm just not there to my whole company. 100 people flew in. We paid whatever, $200,000 to have everyone there. And I'm not operating at my best because I wanted to have a fucking old fashioned the night before.
Mm.
And I'm like, something isn't working for me. And then in January of 25, I just it just changed. I just never wanted to have a drink again. It wasn't even like a choice it wasn't like a choice like, oh, I have to think hard about this or I'm gonna try and go, dry January and see how it goes. I was just like, I don't want this anymore. And now it's been about 18 months. Um, and the level of power, energy, clarity of thought, relationships, success, progress has just been absolutely monumental. Switching from 2 to 4 drinks a month to zero has totally changed my life. Now, a lot of people are looking at that. Oh, this guy's like an over optimization. He's like one of those guys. Why don't you just like, well, you must be no fun. Why don't like, it's okay in moderation to have a couple of drinks. Like you're whatever. Like you stop telling us what to do. One, I'm not telling anyone what to do. So you all do whatever you wish, right?
They're gonna call you the B2B Brian Johnson is what they're gonna
And
try to say.
so it's like, um, what is the difference between alcohol and cocaine? The only difference, right? So there's been many studies. Alcohol is 3 times more harmful than cocaine. They scored it on 16 different dimensions: addiction, family issues, number of deaths. There were 16 different criteria published in a medical paper that compared all these different drugs. Alcohol was the most harmful by far, more harmful than cocaine, meth, heroin. And so objectively, alcohol causes the most deaths. It's the most addictive. It sends the most people into treatment. There's a variety of other statistics about how harmful it is. So, what is the difference between alcohol and cocaine? The only difference is the programming that humans have received about what each of them means and how socially acceptable they are based on whether they wanted to make it illegal and tell you how bad it was during Dare, or whether they wanted to make it legal and have rappers talk about it because they're paid by alcohol companies and have it in every single bar and different things like that. And so once you can realize, oh, the only reason I think about this is because I've been programmed to think about it that way. And to realize that, it was just like, oh, if somebody said to you, oh, it's okay because I'm just doing 2 lines of cocaine tonight, right? And so it's just in moderation, it's all good, right? But that's what we say about alcohol. And so once you can truly see, the only reason I think about it this way is because so many people have told me to think about it this way, not because I decided this for myself. And then you take responsibility for your own life, your own performance, how you lead your family, how you feel. To me, it would just be to me personally, right? Everyone can do whatever they want. It just became really obvious to me. Um, and so you'll never find me at a bar. You'll never find me hanging out with other people that drink. Same with smoking, right? I've smoked before. I know what it's like. I don't think negatively about anyone. It's just not how I choose to live my life anymore. It's not what I want to surround myself with, or different things like that. So that's been my story overall. And the reason I bring up the programs around alcohol is because there are thousands of subconscious programs. Alcohol is just one of the most obvious ones. Um, but how we think we have to just grind and suffer and work 80 hours a week, in order to, and that's what makes us valuable and productive, right? Tons of entrepreneurs fall into that program, like you, like me. And what does it lead to? It leads to overworking, neglecting our family, neglecting our health, and really just not being successful on paper and not being really satisfied with what would objectively be a really great life. It just
I've
causes
had
suffering.
someone
Yeah.
yeah, I've had someone once tell me, and they were amongst a lot of other people that were struggling with drinking and saying they don't have a drinking problem. Alcohol isn't the problem, it's their solution to all of the problems and what we could call programming underneath it. It's just a very easily to access, solution. I grinded this week, I'm gonna have a nightcap, right? Or I've grinded and I gotta go meet other people and network, I'm gonna have a drink, right? But it very much has just been the wrong solution for a very long time that I think has been socially acceptable, which gives it even more power. Because socially, people aren't saying like, "I'm gonna go do meth," right? It's a very interesting thing. Were you gonna say something, Chris?
It was just interesting because as you were going through, right, the before and the after, and you talked about the after and
Yeah.
about like healing relationships and prioritizing your sleep and choosing different habits. And so I'll pose to you the question: is that the cause or the effect?
I believe it's the effect.
Me too.
I believe it's the effect for sure. Well, what I didn't say towards the end is like being a family man, and trying to keep all the burners on the stove. Can I go run a triathlon tomorrow, tuck in my children and take them to church, go on a honeymoon with my wife, and then have a social, vibrant community while running a company. Like, to have all of those burners on is challenging. And, the concept of balance versus harmony and figuring out this is a season I'm gonna go through that. I actually have this, I had this epiphany that I needed some downtime. I needed to disconnect from technology. Like I said, Eric's here listening to this call right now, and he knows I took a week off work. I went to Joshua Tree, not for the traditional Joshua Tree recreational activities, but because I knew it was just quiet. And supposedly, there's just like good energy out there. I don't know if it was from like some meteors that hit the area in the past, but the energy and the silence out there, I had unplugged from everything. And it gave me the opportunity to kind of be with myself. I had encoded, I brought 2 books with me. One of I think I was rereading Atomic Habits, and the other one I was rereading was The Master and His Emissary, right? Which is a really interesting book about the left and right hemisphere of the brain. But I'd never really allowed myself that downtime. What it did is it allowed my team to run with the company. I came back to a company that was doing even better when I left. It gave my wife and I time to think about and process all the things we've been through in the last year together because we are separated. And, distance makes the heart grow fonder. We reconnect after a weekend, and it was a week away, and it was really, really nice. And I just hadn't even had the thought to do something like that up until the point I think I'd done my first frequency mapping. And the map didn't say go to Joshua Tree. I don't think you have any partnerships with Joshua Tree at the moment, but it just became so clear. And then when it comes to my family, I felt more present. So less treating life like a project, which I can tend to do. Very, I guess that would be the left side of the brain or maybe the right, but I treat life like a project, right? Like OKRs for life, unnecessary in a
Mhm.
sense. And then I was just there more for my wife and for my kids. So it's had an impact that I thought initially I was pursuing for the business largely and a little bit of health. But to your point, like my kids are strangely also a little more well behaved and calm. It could be a little bit of summer break and a lot of swimming, but the energy that I must be emitting right now, they must be feeling it to an extent, right?
Yeah, I think it's super fascinating to highlight for the listeners because I think a majority of people think that I just need to do something different. I just need to sleep better. I just need to reconnect with my wife. I just need to uh, be present with my children. Whatever. I just need to do something, and it's like, or I need to stop drinking alcohol. I need whatever, and that the our behaviors are the effect, not the cause. That there's actually so many other things happening before we actually decide to do that thing. And I think that is a breakthrough insight because there are tons of Encoded members that never joined Encoded to stop drinking. It was not in their plan. It was not part of their goal. They didn't think it was a problem. And then it just became something that it's not something that I do anymore. Um, and so I think it's really powerful to recognize that because I think everyone's prescription up to that point is just take the supplement, right? Just do this, just sleep better, right? It's just like this robotic. I'm just like this robot that just does things, and then if I do a certain thing, I get a certain output, and that can get you to a level, right? It got us to a certain level in life, and then it starts to degrade. The ROI on those activities go down, and it almost like is a curve where it's like it's really takes a toll on your life.
Mhm.
Um, and all this is doing is just thinking at a higher leverage for your life, right? Like in our business, it's like, okay, so where I'm going to do the things that create the most leverage, meaning that I get the most output on the input that I put in. And how about thinking about that for our relationships, for our parenting, for our health, right? So that's to me, that's all we're really doing here is getting to a point of higher leverage for life.
I like that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So what's interesting, and here's where I think I believe your world and my world kind of collide is on this show, we talk about trust constantly. The Trust Networks podcast, right? Trust with buyers, trust with the market. But listening to you, I don't think that trust starts like out there. I think it starts with self trust. And I want you to kind of make the case, why does self-trust matter for, let's say, someone like even like a marketer, the people that are listening into this podcast?
Perfect. So the to get into this conversation, the first thing that we really need to do is to level set on what does self-trust actually mean. Because I think that for the most part, if you're like, just pose a question to the audience here, do you trust yourself? A majority of people will be like, yeah, I do. So to put it in a different way, because it's different if I was like, can you run a marathon? Right? Like a lot of people would be like, No, I can't." Right? I haven't trained to do that, and so self trust is not understood to that level because it's poorly defined and it's subjective, and so I think the best way to frame it is in a couple of different ways to get to an angle, right? So the first one is to just take 30 seconds as an audience, right? I'm going to pose it. You can hit pause, then you can come back, and it's just you have 30 seconds to write down who are you. Okay, pause. Take your time. Come back when you're ready. Okay, you did that. Now you're back, right? How clear were you on who you are? How long did it take you to figure out? How much did you have to think about it? How does it match exactly who you want to be? And the answer is that for 99% of people, the answer is no to all those. It's like I'm a dad. I'm working on this company. I kind of got this thing going on. It's like it's not very intentional. It's not well thought out, right? And so, if that is the case, if you do not know who you are, then how can you trust yourself to be you,
Hmm.
right? You can't. It's fundamentally impossible to trust yourself if you don't know yourself. Okay, so that's the first step of it. Um, and then the second part of it is a different angle is that it's just like if we try to run a marathon without training, then we feel symptoms. We get out of breath. We can't do it. We get a stomach ache. We get a cramp. We give up after 1 mile, right? So it's obvious, like we haven't trained for the marathon. On self trust, it's not like that. So when we do not have full self trust, what happens is that we feel symptoms. We feel symptoms like second guessing ourselves, imposter syndrome, feeling anxious sometimes, not going for the thing that we know we want it, but we don't go for it. We think, oh, that person's lucky, but I'm not. We ask other people what we should do. We look to an influencer or somebody else to give us the answer. Right? These are all symptoms of actually not trusting ourselves. And so when we put it that way, it's like a majority of people do not fully trust themselves. And then it's like the final part is, can I actually do the thing that I set out to do? And so um, it's like, do I trust myself to be who I am? That's called self-efficacy, which is a component of self-trust. And it's like, so if you say I'm going to show up differently in that meeting, or I'm going to quit drinking alcohol and then I don't, or I'm going to uh, commit to sleeping better this year and then after 2 weeks you give up on it. That's considered low self-efficacy. I can't trust myself to do what I say I'm going to do. And so there's all these different components of self-trust. Now, if you want to get into, okay, so how do we actually build self-trust? I'm happy to go there now.
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Because when we do not have full self-trust, we end up we end up building a life that we feel like isn't ours. Because it's true. We haven't designed who we are and what we want our life to be. So we end up living, whether you would call it an average life, whether we're living somebody else's life script. Sometimes it takes us a while down that road to realize it's not even our road. We didn't design this road. We're walking down somebody else's. So, um, the way that we build foundational self-trust is through a intentional process. The first step is designing and defining who am I? Who am I? And so what happens, right? Like I'm a visionary leader who creates environments that empower and inspire others. I'm a devoted partner that models expansive trust, growth, and love, right? I'm a caring father who leads our family with peace, joy, and presence, whatever they are, right? I'm a top 1% athlete who takes care of my body every day. I'm a global leader who shows people what's possible. To like, I'm giving you examples because it's very clear to me, right? Now, when it's very clear, our mind, our subconscious mind automatically filters our life through that. When it's truly clear and it's truly embedded, meaning that I'm a top 1% athlete who takes care of my body every day. It immediately, you like, I don't, what is alcohol? No. Like bar? No. And so, but it has to be automatic. So that's the process of actually defining it. Who am I? Training it at a neurological level, which can take 66 days on average. It can take some people a little less. It can take people a little more. I've been doing this for 5 years, so I have stacked them, right? I'm a visionary entrepreneur who shows people what's possible. I'm a top 1% LinkedIn creator who empowers and inspires others over and over and over again. So I've just basically stacked all of these things that I do. And once you stack one and you establish it, it's basically automatic, and then you can stack something else on it. So defining it, training it at a neurological level of this is who I am, so that we automatically make decisions and filter our life through it. We show up that way automatically. And then proving to ourselves that this is who we are, right? Through ongoing action of showing up that way until it becomes automatic. That's called self-efficacy. Most people start at step 3, right? So they do not define who they are. They do not train it at a neurological level, and they just try to do something different. That is called willpower. You can tell it's willpower because it feels really hard. Sometimes it feels energetically draining, and it feels very unlikely to succeed because it is very unlikely to succeed. It fails 91% of the time. And when we try something and we fail, it lowers our self-efficacy. So we're trying to do something good and we fail, it actually backfires and it makes us trust ourselves less. And so the most effective way to start is to design who we are, to train who we are, and then show up differently. So instead of skipping the first couple of steps, to take a process which dramatically improves the probability of success and it actually landing. And then you go through that process every 90 days for a couple of years, and you have fully established 100% self-trust. You never second guess yourself. You never feel imposter syndrome. You never feel anxiety. You never ask somebody else what you should do for your business, for your marriage, for your life. Like, no, like I know who I am and I know what's right for me, and I trust myself to do it. This is easy. And so it's like training for a marathon, right? It might take a little while to train for it, but then once you actually train and you run a marathon, doing it the second time is definitely not, it's like, yeah, I can do this now. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I mean, with everything that's happening with AI right now and the amount of like, from what I've read, people are using AI a lot to validate their thoughts, but to a point of second guessing themselves. Like that's becoming prominent. I think that sometimes I've caught myself like, wait, normally I would lean on my intuition to make a decision. Why am I consulting AI for every little thing in this particular, time, right? Which there's some pros and cons to it. And the people that we work with a lot are, CMOs of companies that are struggling with what I think is a level of self-trust, or they're operating really low on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, maybe in scarcity, right? Fight or flight mode. And they're not at that level of executive decision-making that maybe they were at in their prime. So what we see is like a lot of CMOs running the same exact playbook they ran in 2018. They're kind of like refusing to adapt. And I think that the lazy assessment I would make is like, they just get it. They're past their prime. They're being lazy. But I don't really think that that's your take. I think
It's not.
what I want to know is what's really going on inside of that person that's causing them to resort to the past and to operate more scared.
That for a very long time, conditions didn't change very quickly. And when conditions didn't change very quickly, we could just ask somebody else what to do. We could just wait for McKinsey to come back after 6 months with a project. We could just have our VC tell us the same thing that a company did 6 years ago, and that'll probably work good enough for us now. I can just do what I did at my last company in 2011 and apply it again in 2019 and change a couple of things, and maybe it'll work good enough. And then whatever we did last year, we can just like change it a little bit. Like, don't change it too much because that might be risky. So we'll just change it a little bit and we'll just keep doing the same thing that we've done over and over again. And it was a good enough strategy when conditions didn't change that much. And so what the effect of that is that nobody learned to think for themselves. Nobody learned to be adaptable. Nobody learned to fully trust themselves inside of their career. It developed a class of a very experienced, very talented, very high potential professionals that have dramatically undertrained all the skills that matter in the future. And so now, when things are moving more quickly and we can't wait for McKinsey to come back with a project, or our company won't even fund us to buy Gartner anymore because, like, now we have AI. It's just now all we're doing is we're deferring our judgment to somebody to AI instead of to the consultant or to the person on social media or to McKinsey. And so it's no different than what we did in the past. It's just using a different tool to defer our judgment to somebody else. And the reason it hurts now is because things are moving really fast. And so now, if we do not trust ourselves and things are moving much faster, now our business is at risk, right? Now we don't have 3 board meetings to talk about it. And in addition to that, the companies that these CMOs work for do not incentivize innovation. They incentivize risk mitigation, especially in marketing. So now CMOs are in a really tough spot. It's like, if I do the low risk move, which is doing whatever is accepted, then it's most likely to not work and I'll be fired in 2 years. But if I do something innovative that is risky, it could work, but it's more likely I'm going to get fired in 6 months. And so now you're just in a spot where you're a deer in headlights, right? I have a lot of empathy for this. My business worked with all of these people. Like, I experienced this over and over again hundreds of times. And so now it's gotten more dramatic, more fast, and harder to succeed. And so it's for the most part it's a lose-lose situation. Um and so what I realized during this is that it has nothing to do with the talent of the CMO. It has everything to do with the culture of the company. And no matter how good of a CMO you are, right? You can see some of the quote unquote what's viewed as the best CMOs. Every 9 months they get fired and go to a different company.
Mhm.
And so why is that? Is it because they just have a good brand and they're actually not a good CMO? I don't believe that. I believe that the environments that they enter in set them up to fail, and they're gonna, no matter what they do, they will fail and be recycled. And so, to me, that is the overarching the premise that it was good enough for a long time. It's no longer good enough, and now it's a liability.
Mm. Yeah, I think that the few CMOs that I've talked to in the last few weeks, it it's a very true story where, I mean, they just took a job, but they feel something immediately wherever they started. They could feel that energy. And they're already probably thinking, okay, what company can I apply to next? You don't really get to know until you've probably joined it. And talk about risk mitigation. I mean, we had originally niched down, Chris, in working with cybersecurity companies, which I'm sure you carried a few of those logos at Refine Labs. The risk mitigation that's inherent in a lot of security companies, unfortunately, from a marketing standpoint, is play it safe. Play it safe. Like, they can't even get testimonials. Like, it's a very crazy environment in many ways. But risk mitigation, I hear verbatim, is kind of what these CMOs are doing to make sure that they don't lose their job in the short term.
Yeah. So let me push back on the idea that you don't know until you get in there.
Okay.
Okay. So, if you were going into an interview and you're interviewing with 6 different people in the company, and they all look sick. They're coughing, they're sneezing, they got snot running out of their nose. Then uh, what would you do?
Put on a mask, quickly run outside the door. Don't take the job
You'd
offer.
probably be like, I don't. Yeah, if everyone in this company is sick, then I don't want to subject myself to this. Right? It would
Yeah.
be an immediate no. Um, and so what I'm suggesting to people is that this is the same thing. That we have when we have not focused on our frequency, we end up, and we're at tier 1.8, we end up working with a lot of other tier ones
Mhm.
that are, I would argue, or I would invite people to consider that it is a disease that we don't understand yet.
Mhm.
And that when you've probably experienced it, when you focus and you elevate your frequency, and you spend time with some of those people, it's like you're walking into a room of people that are sick.
Mhm.
Not in a derogatory way. It's just like, I'm not going to subject myself to this environment, right? It's at some level around probably tier 4, you feel allergic to it. You're like, I can't be in this place. Like, I can't even be in a meeting with you. And so it's like, it's not that you can't tell until you get in there. You can't tell until you get in there if you are not aware of
Mhm.
it. Um, and it becomes an incredible filtering criteria. Um, only if you have the level of self-worth that says this money is not worth my health, my self-trust, my creativity, my family life, my sleep, because a lot of people don't feel that way yet. Um, so there is a very clear way, and you must see it in yourself in order to see it in others.
Mhm.
It's the truth.
Mhm.
So, but you
Well,
can
one of
tell, and it's the number one filtering criteria for clients, vendors, jobs, even intimate relationships. It's the number one filter for all of them.
we have a what we market as a workshop before we bring someone into a longer term contract with us. But a big part of that workshop is this a good mutual fit? Right. And there's been a few occasions, even if cash is tight, and I just go, oh, hell no. This is going to drag us down emotionally. This is not good energy. Unfortunately, a lot of it's like, when companies are at the seed stage and everyone's hair is on fire, but we respectfully will decline. And I never felt comfortable doing that up until recently, where I'm like, I trust that whatever's ahead of this decision of saying no to this customer, we will find other opportunity where there's better alignment and we will succeed because of
Mhm.
that. And then by some magic, whether it's by the guy in the sky or, what other, self-trust that we're building, it's just that confidence has grown and it's putting us on a much better trajectory. And yeah, I would say I know a few people on our staff are actually using Encoded today. I won't call it any specific names, but I was like, there's eventually got to be a B2B version or the enterprise version of this because I can only imagine how many companies are completely just unaware and ignorant of what they're going through from a hiring standpoint or even the
Mm.
culture inside of the company because you can't measure it as easily. It's maybe
Mhm.
more qualitative than quantitative today. So I'm sure we could do a whole podcast on that. But what I want to do is I want to throw at least two statements out at you, kind of as a way for you to react to those statements. Does that work for you, Chris?
Cool. You want to do both or one at a time?
Yeah, we'll do one at a time. So, Chris, you did not leave marketing. You followed your own thesis one level down from the company to the actual person running it.
Mm, slight disagree.
Okay.
I would say that I was never in marketing. I was in like system thinking diagnostics, and that where directed that was into complex marketing and sales systems, and now I'm directing it into complex human body performance. So I would say that it was the skill that I was bringing. I was never in marketing. I was bringing a different approach that just happened to be directed at marketing and sales.
So I like that answer because even though you technically disagreed by, with it by saying, I wasn't in marketing, I think that's what I think is unique and interesting, right? With having that engineering background probably lent you to looking at it like that from a system standpoint, right?
Mhm.
So that makes sense. Now, the other one, and I think you had mentioned this on one of your podcasts, it might even be on the website, but AI raised the floor for everyone. The only thing left worth paying for is the ceiling. And the ceiling is a human being who trusts themselves.
Agree, but it's more than self-trust. So, um, having clarity and emotional regulation and equanimity and self-trust are the foundation that allow you to express the things that deliver real value in the future economy. Creativity, vision, deep human connection, adaptability, that you can't express the higher order, super valuable ones if you don't have a foundation of self-trust, clarity, emotional sovereignty, and others. And so that self-trust is a major important one, but not the only one. And that as leaders, whether it's business owners, leading our family, leading our community, that that these are the foundational things that matter most of all of the people around us that we are developing.
Yeah. 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 Let's stay on that too, because I have this question, then one last question before I let you go. So staying on that, I think your own website says it. What used to, feel like your ceiling becomes your floor. AI just raised the floor for everybody at once. So what happens to the people and the marketers who only ever trained for the old floor? What does the future look like for them?
What did the future look like for the factory worker that never learned how to use a computer? Some some of them are still working in a factory. There's way less factory worker jobs. They're not the highest paid in the economy. They're relatively low value jobs in the economy, but there are still some of them um, that you just, it's not like your life is terrible and you the worst person ever, but you significantly fall behind in
Mhm.
terms of where the world is going. Um, and so I think that there that there this is the most incredible opportunity of anyone's life, not to be the best AI builder, which is what everyone's telling you to do, but to leapfrog all of the people into a new economy. It's the greatest opportunity of our lifetime, to think differently, to build the skills that really matter for the future, that are going to be the most valuable in the future. It is the greatest economic opportunity for the most people with the least barrier to entry that has ever existed in society.
Yeah, I think for the people hearing that, especially for the people that kind of like to self-identify as like front runners, I think that's kind of that call to them where it's almost like we're in this agriculture era moving to the industrial era. You could leapfrog that and be in the knowledge era, right? Like there is a major leapfrog. And I think one thing you've always done well that I've respected is you pull in history to really make it clear on how society has changed and evolved. And a lot of what you're building is rooted in science. And I know you have your work cut out for getting the population at mass to understand this stuff. Because I've had to listen to, 2 dozen podcasts and really not to get the message, but for me to fully internalize it. So that said, before the send off, I did have one last big one. And then I want to kind of send, people off. So your whole product kind of surfaces like the hidden programs running behind a person's life or their way of thinking and responding to life. You've obviously run it on yourself, right? You said it's almost been 4 years now. So amidst that, what's the program that you're still working on or perhaps still fighting? The one that you feel like you haven't quite beaten yet and you're kind of trying to work through yourself too.
Well, the 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 thing is that the let me try to figure out the best way to explain this. That it's like once you beat a level, right? Now you have a new level with new stuff, right? And so it's not like it's like if you can't beat the program at tier 1, then you're not gonna get to tier 2. Like, it is what it is. But then when you get to tier 2, there are different things that are getting in your way. Kind of like if you go to the gym the first time, maybe you deadlift 95 pounds. Maybe you deadlift the bar, right?
Mhm.
And then now you can deadlift 100 pounds, but you can't. But when you get to 400, there are different challenges that exist there than they did when you were doing the bar. It's the same activity, but different challenges. So it's like, um, and so the the a big part of moving from tier 2 to tier 3 is that all of the societally driven programs have been reprogrammed. So all of I can see them, right? I intentionally choose whether I want to buy into them or not, right? I know that a house isn't a good investment. I might still buy a house, but I at least know I'm not buying into the program around it, right? Right. I know that alcohol is more harmful than cocaine, right? It's not cool. It's not for relaxing. It's not what people do to celebrate. And so I can see the programs, and that's a big part, and I'm well beyond that, right? So it's at least like I've been intentional about everything so far. Now, at higher levels, it's really about rethinking what is possible. Like, that's what holds you back at a higher level is this even possible or not?
Mm.
Right? Like, could we have this call and I spend 90 minutes together, and it changes your life and you go on and do something amazing, right? Is it possible? That's
Yeah.
something that I'm toying with right now. You know what I mean? It's not to say that I'm great and I can do it. I think that everybody could do it. Whether they believe it or not is up to them.
Mm.
And so, at where I am, it's a lot about breaking down the barrier between what a human can really do and what they can't. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just throw this your way. You are making an impact. Coincidentally, at a very interesting time in my life and with what you're building, and I'm probably not the only person that can say that. But what's interesting is you probably don't even need that kind of validation to entirely feel that, right? I think you're going to feel it in a lot of different ways. And it's public policy and what the whole world thinks they need to do to improve their life and how people are approaching change today. It's nothing as groundbreaking as I think what you're building, but it's also simple, right? Like this concept, my son saw me doing it at the kitchen counter table this morning at like 7 a.m. "What are you doing, dad?" I'm like, "I'm training." And he's an athlete, he's 7, he plays soccer. We train together in my home gym, run around, we got 5 acres, we're always active, right? But he's like, "What do you mean training, but you're not working out?" I'm like, "I started working out 23 years ago when I was 16, and I just blindly followed it because there was enough momentum, it was socially acceptable. And now I've arrived at people just being like, 'Oh, you're so fit, must be lucky, you're like an overnight success fit guy.'" And I'm like, "No, I just like followed this path, right?" But it had already been laid out, right? And so now this new path that you're laying out, I'm going to be presenting. My wife's doing encoded, my wife, Michelle. My son is like, "Is there a version of me doing that?" So I don't know if you have the family unit package yet,
Mhm.
but I think that that could be something that's really interesting for a lot of people like me who are trying to use this as a way to steward our family besides just letting the education system take them where it's going to take them.
Mhm. For sure, yeah. I especially for sub 10-year-olds,
Mhm.
that parents basically right now they adapt the system to just without buying it for them, right? So and it's almost like at that age, they they have very few programs. So it's not like I need to know what is there. I can just intentionally help them install things that are empowering, right?
Yeah.
So like some parents just use I am enough, right? Like that's amazing, right? I am attractive, I am smart, right? They can be very simple and they can be very empowering. Um, and if we can do it at a young enough age, that it's like, uh, if someone says you're not smart, but you know you are, who's right?
Mm.
It's like, what do you yeah, it's like when I make the example, right? Because someone might say, "You're not smart," or "You're not attractive," or "You're not whatever," and it's like, if we're standing out here right now, it's 95 degrees and sunny in Austin, Texas, and someone tells you it's raining, what are you gonna say? "You're crazy. What do you mean? It's 95 and sunny outside." So you tell your 10-year-old or 7-year-old that they're not smart, they're gonna be like, "What do you mean? It's not raining out. It's sunny. I am smart." And so I think but if we do not have that level of training, we're susceptible to somebody else injecting their own stuff into us. Um, so I think it's a very interesting concept for children. Once it requires the parent to buy into it. You would agree, right?
Mhm.
It's like,
100%.
so the parent has to experience it, and the parent has to shift their. I'm sure your parenting style has shifted in some ways related to it, going through it as well.
Mhm.
Um, that the process is parent, probably, yeah, family leader, and then the other parent typically does it, and then they bring it to the children, and that becomes like a whole thing. So what we're working through from a strategic perspective is getting more parents to do it, and then through that bringing it to the children.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Chris, we kind of joked that before we started recording, hey, maybe this turns into a Joe Rogan podcast, and we're here for 3 hours. Not quite that, but I honestly think this is probably one of the most connected conversations I've had on the show in a really long time, and I mean it. We kind of started the conversation by saying, the engineer, the marketer, and the founder were all the same person making the same argument. And I honestly think that you proved it as we were talking today. So, for everyone listening, the through line today, I think was actually pretty simple that trust is kind of like the last thing that can't be faked or automated. And it starts on the inside, right? And there's an approach to building that trust, not too different than training in the gym, right? Getting in those reps. And you cannot build trust in a market if you don't have trust in yourself. I fully believe, right? And that's like true for a founder, it's true for a CMO, and I think it's true for anyone that's trying to do work that matters in a world where the floor keeps rising and things are changing rapidly quick. So, before I let you go, Chris, two things. First, where's the best place for people to find you? The book and Encoded.
So I published a book called The Frequency Era. It's available on Amazon. You can get it for digital, print, hardcover, however you want. It's just there's The Frequency Era. It covers the breakdown of the macroeconomic situation, what is shifting related to AI, the transition that people aren't seeing. And so if you see and read the situation as chaotic or stressful, or you're worried about what's going to happen, the book really lays it out in a way where you can understand what's happening based on historical patterns and navigate the situation with clarity and confidence. So that's what the book is made for. People that are, you know, my 89-year-old grandfather, he just turned 90 actually last week, is reading the book and loves it. And we have people that are in college that are reading it and everything in between. So I feel like it's applicable to a lot of people. And I also feel like the book is timeless. I feel like it will get more and more valuable as time goes on. But I would invite you to check it out. And then if you like the details and the concept of this, I would encourage you to check out the We Are Encoded podcast. I think that the concepts and the information I'm presenting are deeply nuanced, are often misunderstood, and I think that long form written and audio or video content is by far the best way to get a full understanding of what I'm saying, because it can be in short form content on LinkedIn. It's often misunderstood or misinterpreted. And so I've moved much more to long form content to have the space and the nuance to be able to explain the depth of what I'm talking about and the power of it. So those are the two places that you can find me, or where I'd recommend. I'm also available on LinkedIn. You can follow me there, Instagram, YouTube, and other places as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. And second, is there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with before we wrap up here, Chris? I know we covered a lot, but
We did cover a bunch. Um, I think that the thing that I feel compelled to share, which it's kind of coming out of left. I don't know where it came from. It's coming out of left field, but I'm excited to share it. Um, is that there's a mindset switch that I want to present to people, um, which is that um, when we look at things that are going on inside of us, and we feel things like we feel anxiety, we feel imposter syndrome, we feel overwhelmed, right? We react a certain way with our friend or with our business partner or with our spouse, and we don't want to show up that way, right? We get frustrated, we withdraw, whatever. We want to go for something in our life, like we want to go for that opportunity. We want to start a business that we've been thinking about for 2 years, but we're just not doing it, right? We're procrastinating, we're pushing it off. We want to quit our corporate job and go something for that we feel passionate about, but we don't do it. That we like all of these different things that I would invite people to consider that these are symptoms. That this is it's not that's not who you it's not who you are that you procrastinate. It's not who you are that you feel anxiety. It's a symptom of not training our frequency. It's a symptom of not having a powerful nervous system that can sustain that level of pressure with calm confidence. And that when we look at it that way, it stops being something that is debilitating or that we can't figure out or that's holding us back or that it's just who we are and it's always going to be this way. And it turns into something that's like, oh, like if I follow this plan and I have some discipline and commitment, then I can change this. That isn't something that's going to keep affecting me for my it doesn't have to affect me for my whole life. I used to think that way. I thought I just anxiety was who I am, right? I have a stressful job. I'm a founder. I'm just going to get anxious sometimes, and that's just the way it is.
Hmm.
That's right. It's like I haven't felt anxiety at all in the past 2 years, and so to invite people that these are symptoms instead of conditions. And so we understand it very well in fitness. We understand that if I don't exercise my legs, maybe it'll be hard to stand up out of the chair, right? If I don't go on a do cardiovascular exercise, I'm definitely not gonna be able to run a marathon. If I don't do that, maybe I'm gonna get tired walking up the stairs. Maybe I'll have to take the elevator instead of walking up the stairs because I just can't do it. That if we don't get a lot of sleep, then we're going to feel physical symptoms afterwards. So we understand this at a physical level that if I do certain things or I don't do certain things, then I'll feel these symptoms. And to understand at a psycho emotional level and a behavioral level that the same symptoms exist from our frequency. Um, so I want to share that. It's
Mhm.
not really the thesis but I landed about a week ago the concept for. So now I have one book published. I have one book that's in draft, maybe 50% done. Had a concept land for another book. So now I'm kind of like on, writing the first couple chapters of technically my third book. Now I got a bunch of irons in the fire. And the concept of the third book that's really at the early stages is that almost everything that people are struggling with, the root cause is misidentified. But the mental health issues, they think it's a biochemical problem. They think it's this problem, and when it's misidentified, it's mistreated. And that the root cause of a majority of the mental health challenges and a variety of substance abuse, a variety of other challenges and comorbidities, for lack of a better way to say it, are because of our nervous system malprogramming.
Hmm.
And that is actually the root cause, and that the mental health challenges would be significantly reduced without medication, without therapy, by working through when it's properly identified. And I don't want to give too much away. But the title of the book is called "The Invisible Epidemic," and that there historically we have had biological epidemics, the COVID, the Black Plague, things like that. And if you go back in history, kind of like what I did with the frequency era, you can see the common patterns of how people misread a epidemic. They interpret it through their existing mental models and frameworks. They misidentify it, and when it's misidentified, they mistreat it. And in order, the person who eventually figures out what it is and how to solve it brings an entirely different framework and way of thinking to it.
Mm.
And so I feel like a lot of there's never been more people in therapy. There's never been more people on anxiety and depression medications. There's never been more people using an AI therapist. There's never been more money invested in all of these different things and more people using them. And the mental health statistics get worse and worse every year. They've been getting worse for the past, since 2014 when they started measuring it. It's been getting worse every year. So why is that? People blame it on social media. They blame it on AI. They blame it on whatever they want to blame it on. And social media is a contributor. What social media does is it is a delivery mechanism. It delivers subconscious programs at a high, rapid rate, way faster than MTV and magazines, personalized to you in a way that infects you way faster. And so it's actually not social media's fault. In some ways it is. But social media is just one of the many mechanisms that deliver this invisible disease over time. And so that was the first time that I started to talk about this concept. And it was interesting because when I talked about the frequency era a year before I started writing the book. I talked about it on a podcast. And so this is cool. I remember that exact podcast, and now I'll remember this one because it's the first time I've ever talked about it publicly. It'll form at a much deeper level. But that was the first explanation of the thesis of the book.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of that moment. That's so awesome, man. Well, Chris, I wanted to say thank you for being so generous with your story, letting us in a little bit. I think people have got to know you from the outside in, but now they're starting to kind of get to know you from the inside out through some of these experiences too that led up to Encoded. So to everyone listening, I encourage you to go raise your ceiling, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, bro.